On this day, 1922, yes, I know we're all young, I know that, don't be silly. But on this day, 1922, they brought in the very first radio license, that's right. And that was, in our money today, 50 pence. This was the BBC, of course, still at that point trying to find ways to make money to keep itself going. And they came up, as I say, with the radio license. It was very successful. Millions of people, of course, listened to the wireless, as it was then called, for their entertainment. And the wireless created some, mega stars, when you think about it, of the day. So many people only realize that now, it's the people that we remember in our lifetimes, is it not? DJs that spun the records that we thoroughly enjoyed through our teenage years, the voices of hearing a dedication back to you, that sort of stuff. When you wrote in, yes, no internet, remember that. But it's interesting to note that everything's gone before us, as I often say here on the show. And if you were a child of that particular era, literally from the 1930s right through to 1951, you'll remember this guy, a very famous BBC announcer, and more importantly, a children's presenter called Uncle Mac. He was a superstar of his day. Let me explain. Hi, good morning, Neil Sean here. Nice to have your company, and as ever, thank you so much for joining me. That's right, Uncle Mac indeed was a megastar. It's hard to imagine, as I say, that we think of things going long before we were here or what we remember. But of course, marketing branding has always gone on. Now, what was interesting about Uncle Mac, and really he had, and as I say, an incredible career, really starting out in the 1920s, but he managed to really cement his fame by becoming really the very first big BBC children's presenter. He adored reading stories, created books, all of that sort of stuff. But his fame really shot off during this particular period. Derek McCulloch was born in 1897 and sadly passed away on June the 1st in 1967. He was first a BBC radio producer, then he became a presenter. He famously became known as Uncle Mac on Children's Hour and Children's Favourites. He was the head of children's broadcasting for the BBC from 1933 until 1951. Many people will remember many of their favourite segments from Children's Hour, including Beatman's Toy Town playlist, in which McCulloch played the central role of Larry the Lamb. In 1939, the audience for Children's Hour reached 4 million people, and his infamous sign-off line, "Good night, children everywhere," became more poignant after the evacuation of many children from their homes at the start of the Second World War. He resigned from the BBC in 1950 due to ill health, and then he became a very successful children's editor for the News Chronicle. However, he continued to chair Nature Parliament, which ran roughly every month on Children's Hour. So popular was Uncle Mac that in fact he was invited to Buckingham Palace by, of course, what we now know as the Queen Mother. She realised that the princesses thoroughly enjoyed his broadcasts. They couldn't believe it. There was Uncle Mac literally in front of them. And when we talk, as I often say here on the show, about branding, he produced and released and authored so many children's books in his lifetime, virtually rivaling Enid Blyton for popularity in sales. So it just goes to show, doesn't it, that these people are forgotten in our time, sadly in our timeline now. But truly, they were international names, and simply just their voice can evoke so many memories. I would think that there are many different Uncle Macs around the world, in all different parts of the countries that we broadcast to, because everybody had their very own special favourite presenter growing up. For me, in my generation, of course, it was things like Blue Peter and Magpie, ITV and BBC. We just grew up with those people. And when you see them today, you are sort of transported back to being a 10 or 12-year-old, even younger at times. Do you remember Uncle Mac, listening to him on the radio? Do you remember his catchphrase, "Good night, children everywhere"? If you do share the memory. And if possible, like and share this video. It's always nice to keep the memory of those who have entertained us for so many years alive. Neil Sean in the very heart of London.